Have you ever thought about ancient texts? You know, those really foundational writings, and wondered if maybe there's more going on, like hidden layers of meaning just under the surface?
hmm
What if some texts had these incredibly complex numerical patterns, linguistic structures that, while some sources claim, just defy coincidence,
Right.
that they point to something, I don't know, much more intentional? Today we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating source that makes exactly those kinds of claims.
That's right. And our mission today for this deep dive is really to unpack these claims. We're looking specifically at perceived mathematical, structural miracles within the Qur'an.
Okay.
And this is all based on a particular YouTube source we examine. So we're going to lay out the patterns it alleges, explore the arguments the source makes for why they matter, and basically give you the factual content as presented by the source for you to consider.
Okay, let's get into it then. We're starting with chapter 32 of the Quran. It's called Sajda,
Sajda, yes, meaning prostration.
right? Prostration. And it has 30 verses in total. Now, this source points to some, well, pretty striking observations about verse 15. That's the actual prostration verse itself. What's it highlighting there?
Yeah, it gets quite specific. So first off, verse 15 is exactly 15 words long. Simple enough start, right?
Okay, verse number matches word count.
Exactly. Then, if you look for the word prostration within that chapter, chapter 32, it appears as the 186th word.
186 word.
Okay, now here's where the source makes a connection. If you sum the digits of 186, so 1 plus 8 plus 6,
That's 15.
it's 15, which is the verse number itself.
Ah, okay.
So the source presents this as, an initial clue, maybe suggesting a kind of deliberate design, something more than just surface text.
So the position of the word prostration, according to the source, links numerically right back to the verse number. How does the source say this connection goes further? Within the chapter, I mean.
Well, it connects in a couple more ways, according to the source. That prostration, verse number 15, multiply it by 2.
Okay, 15 times 2 is 30.
Which is the total number of verses in the entire chapter.
Right, you said it had 30 verses. Okay.
Yeah. The source highlights that as another deliberate match. And then take the position of the word prostration, again, 186. Multiply that by 2.
186 times 2.
Yeah.
370.
Exactly. And the source claims that 372 is the total number of words in all of chapter 32.
Wow. So verse number times 2 is total versus word position times 2 is total words, according to the source.
That's the claim. Again, pointing to what it calls an intentional numerical structure.
That level of, well, alleged numerical alignment in just one chapter. Is pretty thought-provoking. Makes you wonder what the source is really driving at, the implications. Now, if those patterns in chapter 32 got your attention, the source then shifts gears to chapter 71. This is the chapter of Noah, or Nu.
Nu, yeah.
And here it apparently unveils even more sort of elaborate connections. This chapter has 28 verses.
It does. And the connections here, as the source presents them, they get really intricate. So first step, take the chapter number 71. Subtract the total verses in it, which is 28.
71 minus 28, that's 43.
43. Now hold on to that number. The source claims that the name Noah, or Nuah, is mentioned a total of 43 times throughout the entire Qur'an.
Okay, so the chapter number minus verses equals the total mentions of Noah in the whole book.
That's the claim. But it keeps going with 43. The source says there are exactly 43 chapters that come after chapter 71 which don't mention Noah.
43 chapters after, okay.
There are also exactly 43 chapters that come before chapter 71 that also don't mention Noah.
Before and after, the same number, 43.
The same number, 43. It keeps reappearing, you see. And then one more link. The number of chapters in the Quran that do mention Noah, it's 28.
Which is the number of verses in chapter 71, Noah's chapter.
Precisely. It matches exactly. The source argues connections like these are just too specific, too interlinked to be put down to chance.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of 43s and 28s all weaving together around Noah. But the source doesn't stop there, right? It brings in multiplication, prime factors, and all that.
Yeah. Yes, there's more. If you multiply the chapter number 71 by its number of verses 28.
Okay, 71 times 28. Let me see, 1988.
1988. The source then claims that if you go to the 1988th verse in the entire Quran, counting from the beginning,
The 1988th verse.
that specific verse reportedly has exactly 43 letters.
There's 43 again, from the chapter number minus verses earlier.
Exactly. And for those interested in the math details, the source also points out that 71, the chapter number, it's presented as the largest prime number that is a factor of 1988. So 71 divides evenly into 1988, another claimed numerical link.
So it's not just counts and positions, but mathematical properties too, according to the source. And you mentioned it wasn't just numbers, but linguistic details too, about the name Nu itself.
That's right, yeah. The source highlights patterns in the name itself. Nu is a 3-letter word in Arabic.
Okay, 3 letters.
Its very first appearance anywhere in the Qur'an is apparently in chapter 3, verse 33.
Chapter 3, verse 33. Okay.
Now, jump back to chapter 71, the chapter of Noah. The source notes that the word N appears as the third word in that chapter.
Third word, and it's a 3-letter name.
And it appears a total of 3 times within that chapter.
Okay, lots of 3s there.
Then it looks at the phrase, people of Nu. This phrase is apparently mentioned 14 times in the Quran.
14 times. Okay, where's the connection there?
Well, the source points out something interesting. The 14th prime number.
The 14th prime number, 2, 3, 5, 7, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29, 31, 37, 41.
43. It's 43, which remember...
was the total number of times Noah himself is mentioned.
Exactly. So the source argues this isn't just random data. It's presented as evidence of a profound intentional design embedded deep within the text's structure.
The volume and the way these reported patterns interconnect across chapters, the whole text, linguistically, numerically, it is quite compelling. So the big question the source poses is, what does this all mean? It argues this isn't just interesting trivia, it's arguing for profound intentionality.
It absolutely is. The source details specific points about how the Quran was revealed and compiled, and it argues these circumstances make these patterns, well, extraordinary, suggesting they can't just be coincidence.
Okay, what are those points?
So first, it really emphasizes that the Quran wasn't written like a plan book. It was revealed circumstantially.
Circumstantially. What does that mean in this context?
It means verses came down incrementally, bit by bit, often responding to specific questions people asked the Prophet Muhammad or reacting to events happening over about 23 years.
Right. So not all at once, we're in a predetermined order.
Exactly. Which, the source argues, implies the Prophet couldn't have sort of pre-planned everything. He wouldn't know what question was coming next week or what event would happen next year, so how could he weave these intricate patterns connecting future verses to past ones? That's a key part of the argument for non-human authorship presented by the source.
Okay, that makes sense as an argument.
Yeah.
And there was also the point about the prophet's literacy, or the claim about his literacy.
Yes, exactly. The source highlights the traditional Islamic view and historical accounts that the Prophet Muhammad could not read or write. He was unlettered.
Right.
So from the source's perspective, if he couldn't read or write, how could he possibly have manually calculated word counts, tracked verse numbers across decades, summed digits, found prime number connections? How could he have, masterminded, as the source puts it, this complex literary and numerical structure himself?
So the source presents that as a major barrier to the idea of human engineering.
A significant barrier, yes.
Right.
And there's one more piece. The source adds that the Quran wasn't even revealed in the final chapter and verse order we have today.
Oh, right. You mean the collection process.
Exactly. The collection and collation, putting it all together into its current book form, reportedly happened only after the Prophet's life was over, once all the revelations were complete. It wasn't compiled sequentially as it was revealed.
So the final arrangement wasn't known during the revelation period itself.
That's the point the source makes. So it asks us to consider, how do these conditions line up? You have circumstantial revelation over 23 years, a prophet who reportedly couldn't read or write, and a compilation process that happened after everything was revealed and wasn't necessarily sequential. How, the source asks, could a human author, under those specific conditions, possibly engineer these incredibly complex, interwoven numerical and linguistic structures that span the entire text?
Right.
The source asserts that these circumstances strongly point away from human authorship for these patterns, suggesting, well, a different kind of source altogether.
So we've taken a deep dive today into some really quite remarkable numerical and linguistic patterns, all presented by this particular source. From those specific counts and sums in chapter 32, Sajda, to those really intricate connections around Noah in chapter 71, involving chapter numbers, verse counts, total mentions, prime numbers.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And we've looked at the arguments the source makes about why these patterns are significant, focusing on the nature of the Quran's revelation, that it was circumstantial, piece by piece,
Right.
that it was compiled later, and crucially, the claim about the prophet being unable to read or write. These points are presented by the source as key evidence that these patterns aren't just coincidences.
So, thinking about all these claims we've unpacked from the source, the circumstantial revelation, the later compilation, the prophet's reported illiteracy, if we accept those premises as presented, what new questions does the existence of such intricate numerical and linguistic patterns then raise for you, the listener? Does it change how you think about ancient texts in general, about questions of authorship, or maybe about the role interpretation plays when we find these kinds of patterns? It's certainly a lot to ponder.
Definitely something to think about further. We really encourage you to mull over these insights and the questions they raise.
Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. I hope you've gained some valuable insights. If you're a truth seeker, yearning for divine light and ready to step out of darkness, now is your moment. The truth is that Allah is the one and only creator of the universe. He has sent over 124,000 messengers and prophets to guide humanity, starting with Adam and culminating with the final messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all. If you resonate with this message, you might be ready to embrace Islam. Simply recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. For further support, feel free to join our WhatsApp group. You can send us a private message there. The link is in the video description. Don't wait until it's too late. We look forward to connecting with you soon.